This is Jewish Board Talk with Cherise Zeffert, only on 101.9 High FM.
On the 20th of September 1944, the British government consented to the establishment of a Jewish Brigade army. It consisted of 5,000 volunteers from mandatory Palestine and was initially considered a token army. Claytonian Howard Joffe has written a book on the history of the Jewish Brigade during the last few months of World War II and the role they played in saving Holocaust survivors. The book is called No Place to Go, 1944, and Howard joins me now to tell me more. Howard, welcome, and thank you so much for joining me.
Good morning.
Tell me what your interest in this book was.
I came across this comment about the Jewish Brigade, which fascinated me because I had not heard it before. So I did some research by going to the local library, the Gittlen in Cape Town, where I took out 3 books. And what astounded me was that I had noticed that the books had not been loaned for 6 years, which meant to me that the story wasn't out there. Right, opportunity.
So the story wasn't out there. You felt you needed to tell it. Did you know about the Jewish Brigade before you?
Absolutely. That is the whole point of this conversation, Cherise. Knew absolutely nothing about it, which upset me in a way. Such an amazing story. It's the story of the second Exodus, in my opinion. And it's a story that has to get out. It's not Howard Joffe's story. It's a story I've come across that needs to get out there.
Tell me a little bit about it. I must be honest, until I read your book, I'd heard of the Jewish Brigade. I kind of knew, but I didn't actually realize that they were started by the British Army. Do you want to tell me some of that history?
Indeed. I've got some notes here. About 5,500, 5,800 men were being trained by the British Army, but were not allowed to go into battle. They were in guard duty. And obviously these men were terribly frustrated. And word had come out of Europe what was happening to the Jews. And then in September 1944, Hashem put an idea into Winston Churchill's head, said, okay, let's give these boys a chance. Now, the reason why they had not been allowed to go into war is obviously political, the Arab world. And then in the House of Commons in England, they voted to let the brigade listen to this fight under the Star of David prior to Israel becoming a country. It's an amazing story. And then the book proceeds to take us through till we get to our first battle against the Germans in 1944, northern Italy, where, believe it or not, we gave them a hiding. Now, until that time, Hitler's armies had gone through Europe. They were brilliant armies and very successful. Our Yiddish boys gave them a hiding. The story has not been told. Amazing.
And then, of course, they were very passionate about rescuing Holocaust survivors and getting them into Palestine at the time. I've gone through your book and many of them have been highly awarded, received medals. Is there any particular person or story that you'd like to share?
I've been lucky in my life to have met 3 or 4 prisoners of war. So I put them into my book that I changed their names. But the story doesn't end with the Jewish Brigade fighting in northern Italy. It continues, as you will read, getting Jews out of their camps, getting people into Palestine, which is then called Palestine. They speak about death squads hunting out the SS officers who were fleeing all over the place. I don't glorify the war and the killings because that's not our way, as you know. It's an amazing story. It really is an amazing story.
Do you want to share a bit of it?
The book. You must read the book. I think persons, other religions, and certainly every Jew should read this book. The story, how Almighty, how God came to the Jewish people's aid in the hour of need. Hashem helped us leave Egypt, helped us leave now the ashes of Europe during the Second World War. This book records the events leading up to our first win during battle against the Germans in northern Italy in late 1944. But there's much more, much more. The members of the brigade fighting under the Star of David before Israel came into being performed other amazing tasks, all thanks to Hashem. We exalt Hashem for helping us hunt down and annihilate the fleeing SS German officers. We hear how they helped and transported thousands of aiding former Jewish camp detainees, women and children, get to Palestine. If this is not enough, we hear how 58 of these men, well-trained British Brigade soldiers, became the spine of the newly formed IDF, which was to defeat 6 Arab armies in 1948.
It is an amazing story. And you said you were lucky enough to have met 3, did you say prisoners of war?
Yes.
In your life? And you've changed the name for the story. Why?
To hide their identity. I just felt the right thing to do. One of the men is an uncle of mine, another man I met in the Garden Synagogue, and I felt it right to disguise their names.
Was it their choice?
They're not alive at this stage.
Okay, all right, I understand. Okay, and the prisoners of war, were they from the British Brigade? Have you met members of the British Brigade?
No, they were not from the British Brigade. I have not. I was able to speak to the daughter of one of the Jewish Brigade members who had died 4 months earlier prior to me speaking to her. What I would like to add, if I may, is that the book's dedicated to a fellow who was 11 years of age, who was in the camps. He came to Cape Town and we met up, and he subsequently passed on, but this is dedicated. His name is David Kosuch, that's his real name, and he's in the book as one of the characters.
Are there any characters, I know you want us to read the book, but are there any characters in the book that you'd like to talk about now, just to whet our appetite?
The book talks about the leader of the brigade being a dog cheese song, and now this man was a man who crossed my path, or crossed his path, correction, when I was saying Kaddish my father in 1962. He was an Egyptian Jew, had been brought up in England, and had been trained the paratroopers in England in the British Army, and he took me under his wing, because I knew nothing, obviously, at age 17 when I was saying Kaddish, talking about the Amidah, not to talk, etc. And he was a character of note, and he is the leading character in the book.
Okay, so Howard, if people would like to get a copy of the book, what should they do?
072 062 8511, which is my cell number, and I'll put them on to the lady who's handling in Johannesburg.
And my last question for you, what would people reading the book what would you hope people reading the book would get out of it?
We're not the meek and mild people that people imagine us. We didn't just bow down to the German army. We actually stood up to them. That's the first thing. Secondly, for the generations who follow us, I've gone to some great detail, probably too much on the concentration camps. This is not enjoyable reading. It's for the people coming behind us to read exactly what happened. It's awful. You'll read about the cruelty. So there's two things I must repeat myself. Number one, we actually beat the Germans in battle. Amazing. We weren't at all these quiet leadership warriors bowing down, going to the gallows. We were not that. Hashem, we have to exalt Hashem for helping us again in our hour of need. There's no question about that. Lots to come out of this book. It's a thin book, not a big book, not a long read. And the reason why it's not a long read, because the story has ended, it's still work in progress. When the world finally recognizes Israel, that's be the end of the book. I can't print that right now. Okie dokie.
Yeah, no, that's true. Howard, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for your time.
That was Capetonian Howard Joffe telling me about a little bit about the Jewish Brigade Army, which is featured in his book, No Place to Go, 1944.